What if forgetting wasn't just a symptom, but the beginning of the end? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you can't remember how to tie your shoes. The next day, you no longer recognize the faces of your family. Soon, even your own reflection becomes a stranger. And finally, your body forgets how to breathe. This is the horror of Nick Cutter's novel, The Deep. A story where the world is slowly unraveling under the grip of a terrifying disease known only as the Gets. It is not a monster that kills us. It is not a plague of violence or blood. It is something far more insidious. Our own minds turning against us. Nick Cutter, the pen name of Canadian author Greg Davidson, has become one of the most distinctive voices in modern horror. His works are raw, grotesque, and unforgettable. With The Troop, he gave us survival horror in its most savage form. With Little Heaven, he explored cosmic and cult terrors. And with The Deep, he turned his gaze to the abyss beneath the ocean and the abyss inside our own minds. Gets begins innocently enough. At first, it's a moment of forgetfulness, where you put your keys, the name of your neighbor, a childhood song that suddenly vanished from your memory. But soon, the gaps grow larger. You forget how to eat. You forget how to walk. And then, as if the brain itself has erased every function it once held, you forget how to live. Children suffer. Parents waste away in confusion. Society collapses, not in chaos, but in silence. Millions of people simply forgetting how to go on. It is dementia, weaponized, memory loss turned into an extinction event. And it's here where Cutter shows his true genius. Because this horror is not imaginary. We already know what it's like to watch someone forget themselves. We know the pain of watching memory disappear. The Gets is terrifying because it is familiar. It is the fear of every family touched by Alzheimer's. It is the fear of waking up tomorrow and realizing your mind is slipping away. The Gets is not just a disease in the deep. It is the purest expression of psychological horror. The reminder that no matter how strong our bodies are, our identities exist only as fragile threads of memory. And once those threads are gone, what remains of us at all? To understand why the deep is so unsettling, we need to descend into its setting. The ocean. The last unexplored frontier of our world. A place more alien than outer space, and closer than the stars above our heads. At the center of this novel lies the Mariana Trench, 7 miles deep, a gash in the Earth's crust where light has never touched. At its lowest point lies Challenger Deep, the most inhospitable place on the planet. Here, under unimaginable pressure and endless blackness, a research station called the Hesperus has been built. And here, scientists hope to find a cure for the Gets. But Cutter uses this location for more than science fiction atmosphere. The ocean becomes a character in itself, a suffocating presence that crushes down on everyone who dares to descend. Imagine walls of water so heavy they could snap your bones like twigs. Imagine a night so complete that even your own hand is invisible. Imagine the silence of a place where no sound was ever meant to exist. The Hesperus floats above the trench, vast and industrial, but the real horror waits below. 2 miles beneath it, in a station called the Trieste, scientists work in isolation. No sunlight, no fresh air, just steel walls groaning under the weight of 1,000,000 tons of seawater. This is where horror thrives. Isolation, claustrophobia, the sense of being cut off from the world. It's not just about the monsters that may live in the dark. It's about what the dark does to the human mind. Cutter's ocean is the ultimate haunted house, not because of ghosts, but because we were never meant to be here. The abyss doesn't welcome us. It doesn't notice us. It simply waits, indifferent and eternal. When Luke Nelson descends to join his brother in the Trieste, the reader descends with him. Every step downward is a step into a place more hostile, more alien, more wrong. And the deeper we go, the more we realize that something down there is waiting for us. Something that has always been there. Something that wants us to look too closely. If the ocean is the stage for this story, then the play performed upon it is one of grotesque transformation. Nick Cutter has always excelled at body horror, and the deep is no exception. From the very first pages, we are confronted with images that are impossible to forget. An old man staggering through the heat of Guam, his scalp crawling with mantises,
The insects feed and mate upon his head, tearing each other apart while he shuffles forward in silence. His skin is pocked with sores that leak gray pus. His eyes are blank, his mind already erased by the gets. It is not just disturbing, it is obscene. A vision of flesh becoming alien, a human body turning into a breeding ground for things that do not belong there. But Cutter does not stop with surface grotesquerie. He takes us into the laboratory, into the realm of failed experiments and warped science. Luke's brother, Clayton, is a genius without empathy. As a boy, he grafted flesh onto mice, bending nature into shapes it was never meant to hold. Some of his creatures lived, stumbling through life as deformed parodies of animals. Others died in agony, their bodies twisted beyond repair. One mouse, Ernie, survives as a writhing mistake, hairless, limbless, dragging itself in circles, its guts pulsing beneath a translucent sack of skin. Clayton calls it a failure. Luke calls it cruelty. For the reader, it is nightmare fuel. This is the essence of Cutter's body horror. He forces us to confront the truth that flesh is fragile, that the boundary between healthy life and grotesque corruption is paper thin, that nature itself, when twisted by disease or by human arrogance, can become something monstrous. The old man with the mantises, the children with spotted, rotting skin, the broken mouse twitching under fluorescent light. These images remind us that the body we rely on can betray us at any moment. And once it does, once it becomes unrecognizable, we are left with the most primal terror of all, the fear that we are no longer human. Deeper than the disease, deeper than the grotesque experiments, there lies something far stranger, a discovery at the heart of the trench, a substance that should not exist. The scientists call it ambrosia. At first glance, it looks harmless, a small gelatinous lump, dull and colorless, the size of a bird's egg. But stare at it too long, and it begins to shimmer. Veins of light pulse within it, emerald, violet, and white, like lightning frozen inside glass. It is mesmerizing, beautiful, and wrong. Ambrosia cannot be classified. Every test, chemical, genetic, biological, fails to explain it. It does not eat or breathe. It does not live. And yet it grows. When placed in a petri dish, it consumed the agar, not by digestion, but by harmonizing it, transforming it into more of itself. Matter does not decay in its presence. It becomes ambrosia.
What is it? A parasite? An ancient form of life? Something alien? The scientists cannot agree, because ambrosia resists not just their instruments, but their very understanding. It is not simply unknown, it is unknowable.
And this is where Cutter slides from body horror into cosmic horror. Ambrosia represents the terror of encountering something beyond human comprehension. Something that does not fit into our categories of life and death. Something that tempts us with the promise of a cure, while hiding intentions we cannot imagine. When characters gaze into it, they feel pulled closer, hypnotized, as if ambrosia were looking back at them. It is not just an object. It is a presence, a thing that wants to be found, a thing that wants to spread. The ocean is terrifying because of its darkness, its pressure, its isolation. But what lies within it, the ambrosia, is terrifying because it rewrites reality itself. This is horror at its purest, not fear of death, but fear of something far worse, the fear of encountering a truth that makes our entire existence meaningless. Every great horror story is built on characters who carry their own scars, and in the deep, those scars run deep. A novel isn't just about a world-ending disease or a mysterious substance at the bottom of the ocean. It's about the people who confront it and the shadows they bring with them. Luke Nelson is our guide into the abyss.
He is a veterinarian, an ordinary man pulled into extraordinary circumstances. But Luke is not a blank slate hero. He carries grief, guilt, and a history of trauma that bleeds into every choice he makes. Most of all, he is haunted by his family, by his brilliant brother, and by his monstrous mother. Clayton Nelson is the opposite of Luke. Where Luke is empathetic, Clayton is cold. Where Luke doubts, Clayton obsesses. From childhood, Clayton was a prodigy, but his genius came with a void where human warmth should have been. He experimented on animals, bending life into grotesque forms, not out of malice, but out of indifference. To him, everything was material to be used. Flesh As an adult, Clayton becomes a scientist in the deepest part of the ocean, consumed by his search for answers. He represents the archetype of the hubristic genius, brilliant enough to unlock forbidden doors, and arrogant enough to ignore what might come through. And then there is their mother, Beth, Battleaxe Beth, a towering, cruel figure whose presence lingers in Luke's nightmares. She was abusive, manipulative, and terrifying. She wielded words like weapons, planting images in the minds of children that scarred them for life. Her cruelty shaped both of her sons, Luke into a man full of guilt and hesitation, Clayton into a man without empathy, driven only by obsession. Even in death, her shadow remains proof that sometimes the most enduring horror is the one that lives in the family home. Together, these three form the emotional core of the deep. Luke, the wounded everyman. Clayton, the monstrous genius. Beth, the ghost of trauma that binds them both. The abyss outside is terrifying, but the abyss inside these characters may be worse, because when they descend into the trench, they are not just fighting disease or confronting Ambrosia. They are confronting the parts of themselves they cannot escape. Beneath the blood, the sickness, and the abyss, the deep is a story thick with symbols. Nick Gutter doesn't just want to frighten us with monsters. He wants to show us what those monsters mean.
The first theme is memory and identity. The Get strips away memories until nothing is left. It forces us to ask, if we cannot remember who we are, do we still exist at all? The disease becomes a metaphor for dementia, for Alzheimer's, for the terror of watching loved ones fade into strangers. The horror here is not just death, it is erasure. Second theme is the ocean as the subconscious. Water has always symbolized what lies beneath the surface of the mind. The Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth, becomes a mirror for the darkest recesses of human thought. Every descent into Challenger Deep is also a descent into memory, into trauma, into what we fear most about ourselves. The deeper Luke goes, the more he is forced to confront his childhood, his guilt, his pain. The abyss is not just around him, it is inside him. The third theme is science and hubris. Clayton represents the arrogance of believing every mystery can be solved, that every boundary can be crossed. But the ocean is not a place built for human exploration. Ambrosia is not a substance that fits human categories. To study them is to invite corruption. The story reminds us that some doors should remain closed, not because of superstition, but because we are not ready for what lies beyond them.
And finally, family trauma. At its core, The Deep is a story about two brothers who cannot escape the shadow of their mother. These themes tie together into a single, terrifying vision. A story where the abyss of the ocean is inseparable from the abyss of the self, where the end of the world begins not with fire or flood, but with forgetting, and where the most dangerous monsters are not the ones we discover, but the ones we carry with us. As the novel drives toward its conclusion, the horrors become overwhelming. The Trieste, the station buried in the trench, begins to feel less like a scientific outpost and more like a tomb. Luke watches as his brother slips further into obsession. Clayton believes Ambrosia is the key to everything. The cure for the gets, the solution to death itself, the answer to questions humanity was never meant to ask. But the more he studies it, the more he is consumed. He begins to change, not just in mind, but in body, as if Ambrosia has already chosen him as its vessel. The station collapses into chaos. Grotesque transformations, hallucinations, and nightmares blur together until even Luke cannot tell what is real. Memories of his abusive mother merge with visions of the abyss. The trench itself feels alive, a vast mouth swallowing him whole. And then comes the ending. Gutter does not offer relief or neat answers. The final pages leave us in a place of dread, where reality has collapsed and certainty no longer exists. Has Ambrosia infected the world above? Has Luke escaped, or has he only descended deeper into the nightmare? We cannot be sure, and that uncertainty is the point. Because horror rarely ends with clarity, the most effective horror stories do not resolve. They infect. They linger in a mind long after the last page is turned. A splinter under the skin that refuses to be pulled free. The Deep leaves us with that splinter. It asks us to imagine a world where forgetting spreads like a plague, where science uncovers something it cannot control, where family wounds echo louder than any monster. And then, It refuses to let us look away. So why does the deep work so well as horror? Why does it linger in the mind long after the final page?
The answer lies in the way Cotter weaves together 4 distinct strands of fear. The first is body horror, from the mantis-crawling old man to the grotesque experiments of Clayton. The novel is filled with images that make the skin crawl. It forces us to face the fragility of flesh and the way life can be twisted into something unrecognizable. Second is psychological horror. The Gets is more than a disease. It is a mirror of dementia, Alzheimer's, and the universal fear of losing ourselves. It asks us what we are without memory, and it offers no comforting answer. The third is claustrophobic horror. The Mariana Trench is not just a setting, but a crushing presence. Every page reminds us that humanity does not belong in the abyss. The deeper Luke descends, the tighter the walls close in, until escape feels impossible. And the fourth is cosmic horror. Ambrosia is a substance beyond comprehension, beyond science, beyond meaning. It represents the terror of encountering something that does not fit our reality, a truth so alien it unravels the mind. Together, these elements form a nightmare that feels complete, a horror that attacks us on every level: physical, psychological, environmental, and existential. In many ways, The Deep sits beside Cutter's The Troop as one of the most disturbing modern horror novels, where The Troop focused on survival in the face of infection and cruelty. The Deep expands its scope, plunging into the very foundations of human fear, and in doing so, it earns its place alongside the greats of the genre, echoing Lovecraft's Abyss, Cronenberg's body horror, and King's family drama. But what makes it truly terrifying is not the gore or the monsters. It is the way Cutter forces us to look at the things we already fear: losing memory, drowning in isolation, and confronting the wounds left by those closest to us. The Deep is not just about what lies in the ocean. It is about what lies inside of us. So, after everything we've seen, the disease, the abyss, the grotesque, and the unknowable, what does the Deep leave us with? It leaves us with a choice. Would you rather face the endless black of the ocean, where no light can reach and no help can come?
Or would you rather face the endless black of your own mind, where memory slips away and identity dissolves into nothing? Both are terrifying. Both are inescapable. And that is why Cutter's novel is so effective. It traps us between two abysses and dares us to look down.
This was Anatomy of Horror, dissecting fear, one story at a time. If you enjoyed this exploration of Nick Cutter's The Deep, let me know in the comments what haunts you most about this story: the disease, the ocean, or the family that shaped its characters. And if you'd like to dive deeper, stay tuned. Next time, we'll be exploring another of Cutter's nightmares, The Troop. Until then, remember, the abyss is patient, and sometimes it's already inside you.